Savannah Rhodes was 42 years old. She had warm brown eyes that had learned to hide a deep pain and a figure that didn't fit the cruel, narrow standards of the East Coast elite her family name had thrust her into. As a black woman from an old money family, she was a striking presence, not for her wealth, but for her quiet elegance and the way she looked at people as if everyone had a story worth hearing. Yet, behind her back, the same people who praised her charitable donations called her the fat heiress. Her husband, Marcus Sterling, was one of them. That morning, the Greenwich, Connecticut mansion smelled of fresh jasmine and gourmet coffee. It was Marcus's birthday. The private chef had prepared a special brunch, and Savannah had personally ordered fresh flowers to adorn the living room. She had carefully chosen a high-end Rolex watch she knew he craved, not for the time it told, but for the designer name that would sparkle on his wrist in campaign photos. Marcus, 7 years her junior, was an aspiring politician, charismatic in public and cold in private. His gaze was that of a hunter, always calculating his next move. They had been married for a decade. No children, no scandals, no love. Sometimes Savannah wondered if the love had ever been real, or if she had simply imagined it, like dreaming of a beachfront house that never gets built. At 10:16 in the morning, she came down the grand staircase holding an envelope. It was a certificate for a $100,000 donation in Marcus's name to a National Children's Foundation. She thought it would make him smile. He loved looking generous. Even more, he loved seeing his image strengthened on social media. The dining room was empty, but she heard voices in the adjacent parlor. She paused, out of sheer habit, and stood motionless behind the slightly ajar door. And then she heard it. "That fat cow disgusts me, Mom," Marcus said, laughing. "I only care about her money. What did you think? That I actually enjoyed sleeping with her?" Savannah stopped breathing. Evelyn Sterling, her mother-in-law, showed no surprise. Her voice responded as if confirming something obvious. "At least pretend, Marcus. Do it until you inherit everything that's hers. After that, you know what you have to do. That woman's days in your life are numbered. Do you want to be tied to a body that looks like an inflated bag, a piñata stuffed with regrets?" They laughed with the lightness of people who feel no shame about their cruelty. Savannah swallowed hard. The envelope slipped from her hand without a sound. Her face didn't change, but her legs trembled slightly, as if the world had suddenly sped up. She held firm. She slowly backed away, climbing the stairs without her heels making a sound, and quietly closed the door to her bedroom as if nothing had happened. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She didn't confront them. That night, they ate dinner together. Savannah offered a cheerful smile and gave him his gift. Marcus thanked her with a dry kiss on the cheek and feigned enthusiasm. Evelyn commented that the wine was excellent and suggested Savannah should try a friend's diet. Everyone laughed, except Savannah. She simply watched them both with a serenity that was less about calm and more about planning. Past midnight, Marcus was sound asleep in the main suite, while Savannah walked barefoot through the house. She looked at every corner. The artwork she had chosen, the furniture she had imported from Italy, the grand piano she never learned to play. Every object was a silent witness to a life that had never truly been hers. It was a museum built to fit a mold that had been suffocating her for years. In the study, she pulled out a sheet of paper and wrote in a steady hand, "Thanks for showing your true colors." She signed it without a name. She folded the note, then opened her laptop. In less than an hour, she contacted a discreet real estate broker and a foreign buyer, and transferred the bulk of her fortune to a new account in Switzerland under a different identity. Having spent years managing her family's wealth, she knew exactly how to move money without leaving a trace. By 5 in the morning, the mansion was behind her. No servants saw her leave. She carried only a backpack, a long coat, her passport, and a photo of herself at 18 when she dreamed of traveling the world, before the sterling name turned her into a trophy wife. 2 hours later, Marcus woke up. He called out for his wife, confused by her absence. He checked the kitchen, the garden, the bathrooms. He found her only as a piece of paper on the pillow. "Thanks for showing your true colors." He crumpled the note, not understanding. He didn't even suspect she had heard the conversation. He figured it was a tantrum, a stupid impulse, emotional nonsense. He called her cell phone. It was off. He sent texts. No reply. He called his mother. "Where is Savannah? Why are you asking me?" "She left. She just left a note. Thanks for showing your true colors." What the hell does that mean? Evelyn felt a shiver run through her for the first time. That same day, Marcus discovered the house had been sold. The buyer had wired the money directly to the Swiss account. He had no access. Legally, everything belonged to Savannah, even his suits. What Marcus didn't know was that the media was about to explode. The bank involved in the transfer had inadvertently leaked a statement to a finance reporter who had been investigating Marcus for corruption. It was only a matter of days before the scandal hit national television. Savannah, meanwhile, was sitting on a city bus heading to the South Shore neighborhood of Chicago, a place where nobody would recognize her. She looked out the window, her eyes calm and her mouth set in a straight line. She carried her old photo in the inside pocket of her coat like an amulet. And for the first time in years, she breathed without effort. She had no fixed plan or destination, only one purpose: to start over from a place where she was worth nothing, to discover how much she was truly worth. On the evening news, the anchor announced, "The wife of rising political figure Marcus Sterling has disappeared. There are rumors she sold their mansion and emptied her accounts. Some say kidnapping, others say it's a marital scandal." Nobody knew for sure, but she did. She knew the real kidnapping had been her entire life. She knew that contempt disguised as marriage would no longer have a place in her existence. And she also knew that soon the world would meet a woman who had been called a lucky fat girl, but who is now determined to prove there is nothing more powerful than a woman who no longer needs anyone else to lift herself up. No one imagined that behind that silent smile lay a truth larger than any betrayal. Savannah Rhodes hadn't escaped. She had awakened. The bus advanced slowly through dusty streets, the windows fogged with the damp morning air. Her backpack rested on her lap. Inside, there were no jewels, no designer clothes, no expensive perfumes, only documents, some cash, a notebook filled with phrases she wrote when her chest couldn't contain the tears, and that faded photograph of her youth, her standing by the ocean with her arms open as if the whole world belonged to her. Back then, she hadn't yet met Marcus. Back then, she hadn't yet become the elegant shadow of a fraudulent life. The bus stopped with a screech. The driver turned his head without interest and said in a rough voice, "South Shore, last stop." Savannah stood up. No one looked at her. No one recognized the woman who, just 2 days ago, graced the covers of fashion magazines and charity event spreads. In this world, she was invisible, and for the first time, it gave her a sense of relief. South Shore wasn't a poor neighborhood. It was a wounded one. The cracked facades seemed to tell stories of fierce winters, broken promises, and hopes that survived like weeds between the stones. Children played barefoot in puddles of dirty water. Women swept sidewalks while carrying babies on their hips. A man sold BBQ ribs from a food truck on the corner, an old radio spitting out timeless, soulful R&B. Savannah walked the streets, observing every detail with a mix of fear and fascination. A taped-up notice on a house gate caught her attention. Room for rent. Shared bath. No questions asked. She knocked on the door. A woman in her 60s with weathered skin and small, distrustful eyes came out. "Looking for something?" "I saw the sign. I'm looking for a place to stay for a while. I can pay up front." The woman scanned her from head to toe. Something about her didn't fit. Too much poise, skin too well cared for in this environment. "Name?" Savannah hesitated for only a fraction of a second. "Maya Solar." "That's an odd name. Come in. The room's free, but I don't give refunds, and I don't like trouble." "You won't have any." The room was small, with a twin bed, a fan that sounded like it was about to fall from the ceiling, and a window without a proper pane. The walls were stained with dampness. It smelled of confinement, but to her, it felt like a sanctuary. She paid for a month and settled in. That night, she didn't cry. She just lay on the hard mattress, closed her eyes, and let the silence do its work. The next day, she walked aimlessly through the neighborhood. She introduced herself as a woman ruined by financial fraud, someone who had lost everything. It wasn't a lie, though not for the reasons everyone imagined. They looked at her with pity, but also with a certain morbid curiosity. She was new, she was strange, she was another sad story in a place full of them. She arrived at a small community health center. The facade was peeling. Inside, there were a couple of rusty exam tables, broken plastic chairs, and a makeshift reception desk made of cardboard boxes. A woman was arguing with a young man about medicine they couldn't afford. "Ma'am, I already told you, we don't have that antibiotic, and if you get it outside, I can't guarantee it's authentic." The masculine voice belonged to a tall man with disheveled brown hair, his shirt sleeves rolled up, and dark circles under his eyes that revealed sleepless nights. His eyes were marked by sadness, but his tone was firm, yet warm. Savannah watched him for a few seconds. He glanced at her fleetingly, then refocused on the patient. "Tell your son to keep coming. Even if you don't have the money, we don't deny care here. We'll find the medicine somehow." When they finished, Savannah approached. "Are you the doctor?" "I'm Elijah Vance. Do you need medical attention?" "No, I came to volunteer. I have experience in organization, management. Maybe I can help with inventory, coordinating donations, things like that." Elijah observed her in silence. There was something about the way she spoke that contained certainty in her voice that didn't match her story of having lost everything. He didn't confront her. He extended his hand. "Welcome, Maya. This place needs more hands than questions." And so, it began. In the following days, Savannah learned to fold stained sheets, organize boxes of expired supplies, and receive minimal donations that arrived like miracles. No one asked about her past. All that mattered was what she did in the present. It was in that same clinic that she met Lena. She was 8 years old, with dull hair and big, dark eyes that looked as if they knew too much. She sat on the exam table, her head resting on the shoulder of a sweet-faced elder. "Ms. Della, she hasn't wanted to eat for 3 days," the woman said. "She has a fever at night, and her skin is getting paler." Elijah examined her, ordered tests, then stepped out into the hall and leaned against the wall. His face was tense. "What is it?" Savannah asked. "I suspect leukemia, but we need the labs, and that costs money." Savannah looked through the window. Lena was playing with a doll missing an arm, murmuring words softly as if telling it secrets. Ms. Della approached Savannah when Elijah left. "You're not from around here. Pardon me, but your hands are clean, your nails are neat, your back is straight. Life here tends to hunch us over." Savannah didn't reply. "Don't worry. I had my secrets when I was young, too. I'm not judging you. I'm just saying that when a woman is hiding something, she has to choose very carefully who she lets look at her, because some eyes are only looking for flesh, and others are looking for a soul. Elijah is the second kind." Savannah nodded, a lump in her throat. 2 weeks passed. Savannah became a part of the place, not for what she knew, but for what she offered: time, listening, commitment. She took care of cleaning, assisting, and carrying boxes. At night, she wrote in her notebook, one sentence repeated again and again: "I never had time for the poor until I became one of them." One morning, while organizing files in the small office, the phone rang. Elijah answered with a routine tone, but his face changed when he heard the name. "Sterling? Are you sure? And the file still exists?" Savannah dropped a box. He looked at her, didn't say anything, but noticed her trembling. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah, just got a little dizzy." Elijah returned to the call, ending it in silence. He didn't explain anything. He just went out to the back patio for a cigarette. Savannah felt her heart pounding, as if it wanted to escape her chest. Sterling. That name was a gunshot in her memory, the echo of everything she wanted to bury. Later, she saw him sitting alone. She approached. "Can I ask what that call was about?" Elijah hesitated. "It's about a patient from the past. A case I thought was closed. They mentioned a name, one I haven't heard in years. Sterling." Savannah felt a chill. "Do you know him?" She lied, as she had so many times to survive. Elijah didn't insist, but his eyes looked at her like someone starting to put the pieces of a puzzle together. Savannah didn't sleep that night. She sat on her mattress, the backpack open, the photograph in her hand, and the notebook full of phrases that weighed heavier and heavier. She was no longer Savannah, but Maya Solar was also beginning to crack. In this game of names, lies, and hidden truths, she didn't know how much longer she could sustain the new life she was just beginning to build. There are wounds that scar, and then there are others that won't let you breathe. And the Sterling name was one of the latter. The question wasn't if Marcus would find her. The question was whether, when he did, she would be strong enough to face him, or if she would fall back into the invisible prison she had fought so hard to escape. Savannah looked at herself in the cracked mirror of the shared bathroom as she washed her face. The water was murky and cold, and the dirty tiles reflected an image of herself she didn't fully recognize yet. Maya Solar. That name had become a kind of armor. She wore it with increasing ease, though a part of her still trembled inside. Weeks passed slowly, but something within her began to change. The humble routine, the real human connection, the absence of appearances, it all started to mold her heart, the way fire molds metal. She no longer thought constantly about Marcus. She no longer replayed that hateful phrase like a dagger embedded in her memory. Now she thought more about other things. Lena's laughter, the weariness in Elijah's eyes, Ms. Della's intuitive gaze, and an idea that began to strongly germinate. To build something new from the ruins, not for herself, but for other women who had also been used, manipulated, and silenced. Lena had become her center of gravity. The girl clung to her with absolute trust, as if she had been waiting for her all her life. They played with rag dolls, invented absurd stories, and shared silences that said more than 1,000 words. Savannah didn't need to be a biological mother to feel that bond. Deep down, she knew this was the love life had denied her 3 times. "Have you felt invisible too?" Lena asked her one morning as they drew on the floor with colored chalk. "Yes, many times," Savannah replied without thinking too much. "Then we're the same," the girl said, "because when people are scared, they look away, and then you don't exist anymore." Savannah felt a lump in her throat. She wondered how many times she herself had looked away, confined to her bubble of luxury and appearances, how many times she had pretended not to see the misery from her armored car. That guilt was a silent, constant companion. One hot afternoon, the neighborhood filled with music. A community fair was organized to raise funds. Elijah proposed it as an excuse for everyone to distract themselves, but it was Savannah who took charge. She convinced the neighborhood women to make sweets, crafts, knitted clothes. She coordinated the spaces, the times, the permits. In just a few days, she became a central figure. "I don't know who you were before, Maya," Ms. Della told her while they kneaded bread together. "But who you are now is good for this place." Savannah smiled. She had stopped correcting people when they called her by her new name. It was more than a disguise. It was a version of herself she wanted to be real. In the midst of this small rebirth, an unexpected memory surfaced. Elijah was talking to a nurse about an old file. They mentioned something that turned Savannah's stomach: Evelyn Sterling. "She was my private patient," Elijah commented, unaware Savannah was listening behind a curtain. "I was fired years ago when I refused to cover up illegal prescriptions they were giving to addicted patients. Her son, that politician Marcus, threatened to destroy my career if I spoke up." Savannah felt a pang. Her story and Elijah's had been connected long before they met. The same last name, the same corruption. The circle was closing without them knowing it, or perhaps fate was crueler than she imagined. That night, as the fair ended, Savannah climbed onto the roof of the building where she lived. She looked at the starry sky, and for the first time since she had fled, she allowed the tears to flow. It wasn't sadness, it was a bitter mix of gratitude and pain. She was alive, she was free, but there were still shadows she couldn't erase. Miles away, Marcus Sterling threw his glass of scotch against his office wall. The crystal shattered without anyone daring to look up. His political campaign was collapsing. Some donors were abandoning him. The media was beginning to suspect. Reporters were on the trail of the suspicious sale of the mansion. Savannah's disappearance had become a full-blown scandal. "Find her," he ordered the private investigator he had hired. "I don't care how. I need her back before this sinks me." The man, an ex-military type with a tired dog face, nodded emotionlessly. He already had some leads, bank movements, phone connections, blurry security camera images. It was only a matter of time. Meanwhile, Savannah visited an old abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the neighborhood. No one watched her. No one suspected she had secretly bought the place using a new identity. Her plan was clear: transform it into a foundation for women who were victims of abuse, a real shelter with counselors, food, housing, and legal aid, a place where others like her could start over without having to lie about their names. She wrote everything down in a thick-leaved notebook: needs, suppliers, funding ideas. Elijah helped her without asking too many questions. He no longer looked at her with suspicion, but with something closer to admiration, although an unmistakable melancholy still beat in his eyes. "I lost my wife to misdiagnosed pneumonia," he confessed to her one night. "Private care killed her. Expensive hospitals make mistakes too. They just cover them up better." Savannah listened without speaking. She knew that, in a way, he too had been broken by a rotten system. At the fair, Lena was selling handmade string bracelets. Her smile was brighter than any street lamp. She ran between the stalls with energy. Ms. Della watched her with tired but happy eyes. Everything seemed to be flowing until the unexpected happened. Lena suddenly collapsed. Her body trembled briefly before going still. A pool of blood emerged from her nose. The silence was immediate. Elijah ran to her, lifted her in his arms, and shouted orders. Savannah followed, barely feeling her legs. At the clinic, they connected an IV, took samples, and applied oxygen. The diagnosis arrived with the force of a bucket of ice water. "The leukemia has progressed," Elijah said, his voice broken. "And we don't have what we need to treat her here." Savannah clenched her fists. There was no way she would stand by. Not now. Not with this girl who had given her back her soul. That night, while Lena slept with a fever, Savannah opened her backpack and checked her last reserve, a single piece of jewelry she had hidden with extreme care, the only one she hadn't sold or left behind. It was her grandmother's ring, with a sapphire that was worth more than the entire neighborhood. She clasped it in her fist and walked to the city. The next morning she returned with a sealed envelope and a check sufficient to begin the treatment. No one asked how she got it. No one had the right. But Elijah looked at her with new eyes. They weren't eyes of suspicion. They were eyes of certainty. "You didn't come here to hide," he told her. "You came here to rebuild yourself. And you know what? You're doing it, even if you're still breathing through lies." Savannah looked down. For the first time, she wanted to tell him the truth, tell him her real name, her story, everything, but she didn't, not yet. Lena, from her bed, smiled at her with dry lips. "Don't leave me." "Never," Savannah replied, taking her hand. The clock kept ticking. Marcus kept searching. But Savannah was no longer the woman who stayed quiet when she heard she disgusted him. Now she was a woman who fought, even if fear still breathed behind every smile, because lies, when sustained for too long, begin to take on a life of their own, and hers were breathing. The question was how much longer she could keep them under control, because when a lie learns to breathe, it can also learn to kill. Savannah woke up before the sun, as she had almost every day since adopting the name Maya Solar. The fan whirred with a constant noise, and the damp walls of the room seemed grayer than ever. She squeezed her eyelids shut before opening her eyes completely. She wanted to avoid, for a moment, the reality that weighed like a tombstone on her chest. Lena was still hospitalized, connected to medications that could barely control the advance of her leukemia. Every minute was a struggle. Every smile from the girl was a shield against despair. And despite having secured the initial funds by selling that hidden jewel, she knew it wouldn't be enough. The treatment would be long, brutal, and costly. Not just in money, but in soul. At the clinic, Elijah watched her more closely. Her movements, her silences, her meticulous way of avoiding talking about herself. It wasn't just admiration he felt for her anymore. There was something more unsettling, an intuition, as if he were walking on a map he already knew, but with the names erased. He was beginning to suspect that the story she told was a shortened, controlled, and glossed-over version. Something inside him said there was more, much more, beneath that sad calm. That morning, while reviewing the medicine inventory in the small makeshift pharmacy, Elijah dropped a comment that wasn't accidental. "Maya, did you ever live abroad? You have an accent, a neutral, educated one. It's not common here." She stopped, swallowed, and thought fast. "I studied for a few years in Europe, then worked in D.C. for a while. That's why I sometimes have that odd tone." Elijah nodded without saying anything, but the doubt in his eyes deepened. Hours later, Savannah visited the abandoned warehouse where she had begun planning the foundation. She sat in the dust on a broken box and pulled out her notebook. She wrote a single phrase: "Fear is a cage with open doors." She closed the notebook and took a deep breath. It was then that she heard footsteps behind her. She turned, and there was Miss Della, with a bag of bread in one hand and a sharp look on her face. "I looked for you at the clinic. Lena asked about you," she said without preamble. Savannah got up, dusting off her hands. "I just came to jot down a few things. I need to get this place running before everything collapses." The elder woman placed the bread on a box. "You're not running from fraud or economic ruin. I knew that from the first day. Not because of what you say, but because of what you keep silent. You don't run from love, dear. You only run from fear. And you, who do you fear?" The question floated in the air like thick smoke. Savannah wanted to answer, but she didn't have enough words for everything she carried inside. She only mumbled, her voice choked, "Myself." The elder woman nodded. She didn't need more. She left the bag of bread, tenderly stroked Savannah's shoulder, and left without saying goodbye. Meanwhile, in Manhattan, Marcus Sterling stared at his computer with contained fury. Before his eyes was a photo taken by a volunteer at a charity fair in South Shore. In the image, a group of women were gathered around a food stall. In a corner, almost blurred but unmistakable, was her, Savannah. Marcus's heart pounded violently. He stood up, threw his chair backward, and shouted an order into the air. "Get the car ready! We're going to South Shore!" 3 hours later, his black SUV with tinted windows slid through the dusty streets of the neighborhood, clashing with everything around it. People looked at him with distrust. Some stepped aside, others pretended not to see. Savannah was returning from buying gauze for the clinic. She was walking with a hurried step when she saw the car parked in front of the medical center entrance. She stopped dead. Her stomach dropped. Her chest hardened. She would recognize that vehicle even from behind and without lights. She didn't think. She didn't analyze. She simply spun on her heels and began walking in the opposite direction, not running, but with the exact rhythm of someone fleeing without wanting to seem like they are fleeing. She ducked into an alley, then another, climbed a small incline, and hid behind a broken wall until the car started and disappeared from her sight. He hadn't seen her. Marcus hadn't found her, but he was close, too close. She couldn't sleep that night. Fear had returned like an old illness. She wondered how much longer she could sustain this fragile peace before everything crumbled. At the clinic, Lena waited for her with bright eyes. She held out a bracelet made of red threads. "It's so you won't leave," the girl said. "Now you're tied to me." Savannah knelt by the bed. She stroked her forehead. "I'm tied to you, even if you don't put it on me." "Are you sad?" "A little." "Why?" "You saved my life." Savannah contained her tears. "Because I don't know how to save my own." Elijah, listening from the doorway, felt something inside him break. He couldn't handle the uncertainty anymore. This woman wasn't just any woman. She had scars that didn't match her invented story. That morning, when everyone was asleep, Elijah entered the clinic's small office and turned on his laptop. He didn't know exactly what he was looking for until he did it. He typed the name that had been haunting him since he met Maya Solar, Savannah Rhodes. The browser returned hundreds of results: photos at social events, magazine covers, news of her disappearance, articles about a mysterious mansion sale, political scandals, and an image that froze him. The same smile, the same eyes, the same face he had learned to read in recent months. Maya Solar didn't exist. She was a mask, a lie. But everything she had done was real. The help, the tenderness, the devotion. This woman, with a past of broken glass, had saved lives. She had resurrected her own, and now he knew who she really was. Savannah Rhodes, the disappeared wife of the man who had fired, humiliated, and destroyed him. The circle was closing. He leaned back in his chair, closed his eyes. He could no longer pretend he didn't know. And now he had to decide what to do with that truth, because the price of knowing is the power to look away, and he wouldn't do that again. Elijah woke up without having slept a wink. The image of Savannah Rhodes on his screen was fixed in his mind like a burn. Maya Solar didn't exist. He had witnessed how she healed the wounds of others while carrying her own with unbearable silence. He knew that if he confronted her, nothing would ever be the same, but silence was also a way of betraying what he valued most: the truth. He found her sitting on the clinic threshold, the notebook in her hands. She wasn't writing, she was just holding it as if it held her balance. "We need to talk," he said without preamble. She looked up. Her gaze showed no surprise. Deep down, she already knew that he knew. "Yes," she replied, slowly closing the notebook. "It's time." They went to the warehouse, that empty space that was slowly beginning to fill with meaning. Elijah watched her with the contained expression of someone about to throw a stone into the water, knowing he won't be able to stop the ripples it creates. "Why did you lie?" Savannah leaned against the wall. Her voice was low but firm. "Because if I told the truth, they would hunt me down. He would find me. They would use me again. And I no longer had the strength to be a pretty object to display in a glass case." "Savannah Rhodes," Elijah murmured, as if the name hurt his mouth. "Wife of Marcus Sterling, heiress to one of the country's largest fortunes. Disappeared, turned into a national mystery, and a broken woman. They didn't put that in the headlines." Elijah lowered his head. She approached him, looking him in the eyes. "I didn't lie to play games. I didn't do it to manipulate anyone. I just wanted a life that didn't hurt." "And did you find it?" Savannah smiled sadly. "Sometimes. When Lena laughs. When you talk to me without expecting anything. When I clean wounds without cameras around." He listened, but there was more inside him than words, more than judgment. "You're not a coward," he finally said. "You were brave to leave, but now you have to be brave enough to come back." "Come back to what?" "To say your name out loud. To face them, to take back what's yours. Because if you don't, they will, and they'll take it all away again, just like they always have." She looked at him for a long time, and something in her chest cracked. Meanwhile, in D.C., the media erupted with headlines. An anonymous report leaked from the prosecutor's office revealed documents, audio, and financial movements linking Marcus Sterling and his mother Evelyn to cases of money laundering, misuse of public funds, and bribery of judges. Marcus screamed furiously at his lawyers over the phone. Evelyn didn't leave her room, not out of shame, but out of fear. That morning, an envelope had arrived at her door with no return address. Inside was a copy of an altered birth certificate and a letter that simply read, "The truth can't be erased." Evelyn didn't need more. The past she had buried with silence was coming back to demand justice. In an act of desperation, she did something she hadn't done in years. She called Elijah. He received the call at the clinic. Her voice was hoarse, almost unrecognizable. "Elijah, I need to talk to you. Only you." Elijah hesitated but accepted. He met her at a discreet hotel far from the cameras. Evelyn had aged visibly in just a few weeks. She wore no jewelry or makeup, only dark circles, tremors, and a fear in her hands that betrayed her. "I'm not here to justify myself," she said without looking at him. "I know what I did, but you need to know something. Marcus is not my son." Elijah blinked. "What are you saying?" "My husband and I could never have children. I was assaulted by a man when I was 18. I hid it. I pretended to be the legitimate mother. I raised that child as if I didn't remember how he came into the world." Elijah felt the air grow dense. "And you never told him?" "Never. Until now, because he is becoming that man, and I can't allow it." There was a long silence. Then Evelyn pulled out a small box. Inside were photographs, documents, and a sealed envelope. "Lena, that girl, what is her mother's name?" "She died giving birth. She's not listed in official records." "Look closely. That girl could be her granddaughter. There are coincidences. I don't have certainty, but there are dates, details." The son of the man who assaulted her could now have a daughter, and that daughter was with them. Elijah left that place as if carrying a dead body. He didn't understand how to connect all the pieces, but something told him the truth was closer than he imagined. That night, Savannah was waiting for him at the warehouse. She had been cleaning, organizing, distracting herself, but seeing his face, she knew he brought more than just bad news. "What happened?" He told her everything. About Evelyn, about Marcus, about the possibility with Lena. Savannah remained silent, then walked toward the window and spoke without looking at him. "I have something to tell you, too." Elijah swallowed. "That I'm sick. Amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, ALS. I was diagnosed a year ago. That's why I left, too. I didn't want to die surrounded by people who would only cry about my inheritance." Elijah didn't know what to say. "I have a few years left, maybe months if I'm lucky, but I want that time to mean something." "It will," he replied, his eyes wet. "We're going to build that foundation. We're going to leave something that endures, even if you're not here." She hugged him for the first time without fear, as if touching him could anchor her body to this earth that would soon begin to fail her. Upon returning to her room, Savannah found an envelope with her name written in cursive. She opened it. It was a letter. She recognized the handwriting before reading it. It was from her mother. "Savannah, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. I don't know how much damage I did to you. I only know there were years when I hated you, because you were everything I could never be, because your father loved you more than me, because you shone effortlessly, and I was just a gray woman trapped in a marble house. Forgive me for being so harsh, for not protecting you, for not telling you that you deserved better than a husband who only wanted you for your name. I knew it from the first day, but I stayed silent as always. This letter is not an excuse. It's a confession and a plea. Don't let my bitterness live in you. Be free. Be strong. And when you can't go on anymore, don't hide it. Allow yourself to be cared for, loved, supported, because even if you don't say it, you also deserve to be saved." Savannah burst into the kind of sobs that shake the soul, the kind that release years of invisible chains. The foundation wasn't finished yet. Marcus was still searching for her. The diagnosis was still in her body. But that night, for the first time, she slept without fear. Because the truth hurts, yes, but it also frees. And she no longer had room to carry lies. Now she just wanted to build something before her body gave out, and she would do it with Elijah, with Lena, with her truth as her only inheritance. The work on the old warehouse finished 2 weeks ahead of schedule. The hands of the neighborhood united as if the project had always belonged to them. Men who could barely read mixed cement with a surgeon's precision. Women who carried years of pain-painted walls as if they were washing wounds. Every brick, every tile held a story. Stories that until then no one had wanted to hear. The Maya Solar Foundation opened its doors in a ceremony without press, without cameras, without empty speeches. Only those who mattered were there. Lena, her hair already thin from chemotherapy, carried the scissors to cut the ribbon. Elijah, his eyes misted, held Savannah's hand as she took a deep breath, as if each inhalation was an act of resistance against death. Savannah had completed the legal paperwork weeks earlier. All her remaining assets, accounts, investments, and shares had been transferred to the foundation's name. Not a single jewel, not one property, remained under her own name. Everything that was once a symbol of oppression would now be a tool of salvation. Savannah walked slowly through the new building's corridors. The white walls, the murals painted by the neighborhood children, the empty consultation rooms waiting for patients, it all moved her deeply. This place wasn't just a structure. It was her legacy, her redemption. Days later, in the shadow of a hallway corner, Evelyn appeared. No one had seen her arrive. She was dressed simply, without makeup or rings. Her eyes were swollen, and her body was stooped, as if she had been dragging a guilt for years that was finally too heavy. Lena was asleep when Evelyn entered her room. She sat by the bed and clumsily stroked the girl's hand. She murmured words that seemed directed more at herself than at the girl. Then she left silently, but Savannah was waiting for her outside. "I knew you would come," she said. Evelyn looked down. "I didn't come to justify myself. I came to ask for your forgiveness. Not for Marcus. He chose his path already. I came to ask forgiveness for myself, for being an accomplice, for staying silent." Savannah didn't speak for several seconds. "And you expect me to forgive you?" "No, just to listen to me." "Then speak." "I watched you fade away for years. You became something so perfect, it was impossible to see you. You were invisible, Savannah. Invisible, just as I was for my whole life. I was used, manipulated, forced to keep quiet too. And you were my mirror. That's why I hated you, because you reminded me of everything I didn't dare to do." Savannah stepped closer, not to hug her, but just to look her straight in the eye. "I hear you, but I don't forgive you for what you did to me. I forgive you for what you did to yourself." Evelyn released the tears she had held back for decades. On television, Marcus was news, no longer as a politician, but as a suspect. His image appeared among headlines of corruption, money laundering, and ties to influence peddling networks. He had been expelled from his party. His face no longer sold smiles. It sold scandal. And then, as a last resort, he appeared in front of the foundation. Savannah watched him from the second floor. She felt neither fear nor rage. She felt something colder, a sad compassion, like someone observing a person who is already lost. He waited for her in the courtyard. He held a briefcase and looked older than the years that had passed. "I didn't come to fight," he said as soon as he saw her. "I came to make a deal." "There are no deals with you," she replied calmly. "I have proof, documents. I could sink you with a public lie. I could say you stole, that you faked your disappearance to take everything." "I already did. I took everything, but not the material things. I took back the dignity you lost years ago." She stepped closer, looking him in the eyes. "Do you really think this place is worth less than everything you had?" "No, I think this place is the only thing that is worth anything, because you can keep all the material things. What you will never have is peace." Marcus took a step back. The truth hit him harder than any threat. And tell your mother that I listened to her, and the girl doesn't need to know who her grandfather was. She already has enough love. She doesn't need yours." Before he could reply, Savannah reached into her purse and handed him an envelope. "If this is the last thing you will ever have from me." Marcus walked away without opening it. Later, in his empty apartment, he read it. "Power without love is hollow. Money without soul is death. You killed me many times when I was alive, but I resurrected, and you are still buried in your own ego. We are no longer enemies. We are nothing. Learn to be alone. Maybe then you'll start to find yourself." Elijah and Savannah shared a night together. It wasn't a night of passion, it was a night of truth. They slept in the same bed, listening to each other breathe, like two castaways clinging to each other in the middle of the ocean. "Are you scared?" he asked. "I have peace, which isn't the same as the absence of fear, but it's enough. I love you." She didn't respond with words. She took his hand and placed it on her chest. The next morning, Elijah went to get coffee. When he returned, he found her asleep, smiling, but she wasn't breathing. He walked over, touched her, and knew she was gone. He didn't scream or cry instantly. He just sat beside her and held her hand until the sun fully rose. On the table were envelopes with handwritten names, one for Elijah, one for Lena, one for Ms. Della, one for Evelyn. Elijah's note read, "Don't cry for what wasn't. Be thankful for what was. I leave the life I wanted for myself in your hands. Never let anyone doubt your light, because you made me shine even in the darkness." Lena's note read, "You taught me that a smile can heal more than medicine. Promise me you will write your story, because the world needs to know a little girl who defeated fear." The Maya Solar Foundation continued to stand. It grew, it healed, it embraced. And on one of its main walls, a mural with Savannah's smiling face reminded everyone that some women, though they may die, never truly leave. Because what changes the world isn't money, it's the truth and the love that is built from it. Elijah didn't know how long he stayed by her side. Maybe an hour, maybe 2. The world seemed to have stopped in that simple room where she, with her quiet body and her smile still present, had decided to go without dramatic goodbyes, without noise, without fear. She left as she had lived her last months, in silence, but leaving indelible footprints. There was no funeral in a marble cemetery, no mass with chandeliers, no fake speeches from politicians. Her body was cremated, as she requested, and her ashes were scattered in the garden of the Maya Solar Foundation, right where they planted a young almond tree that Lena promised to water every morning. The news of her death spread quickly through the neighborhood. Women wept at the gate, children fell silent, and Lena went days without speaking. Elijah walked on autopilot, but he didn't stop. Things had to continue, and he promised himself he wouldn't let her story be buried in that white room. It was Lena who discovered something more weeks later. In one of Savannah's desk drawers, she found a carefully bound manuscript, in the same clear, firm handwriting she used for notes at the clinic. The handwritten title read, "My husband said I disgusted him." The prologue began, "This is not the story of a woman abandoned, but of a woman who learned to abandon herself to please the world, and one day woke up." Elijah read it in a single night. When he finished, he knew what he had to do. Months later, the book was published by an independent publisher. No one expected the phenomenon it would become. It went viral, first on social media, then in traditional media. Women bought it in silence, shared it with tears in their eyes, whispered about it at neighborhood meetings, and analyzed it in universities. Savannah's story wasn't just about a betrayed wife. It was about every woman who had ever felt less than enough. In interviews, Elijah appeared to talk about the Foundation's project. He never took a single cent for the book. All proceeds were dedicated to creating new Maya Solar Foundation locations in other regions. The idea was clear: no woman should have to disappear to live again. Lena was the one who named the second location. She called it the House of the Reborn. It was small, modest, but full of life. She herself painted a wall with the phrase Savannah left her in her letter. "Promise me you will write your story." And she did. Lena wrote. She published a children's book inspired by her experiences, where a little girl defeated the monster of gray days with a smile and a red bracelet. She was invited to book fairs. She gave interviews. She always spoke of Savannah as if she were still alive, and for her, she was. Elijah continued as the Foundation's medical director. There were days when the weight of her absence fell upon him like a stone, but all he had to do was step into the garden and see the women laughing, the children running, the volunteers arriving with enthusiasm, to know that Savannah had won, that her love had not died, that her legacy was not ash, but a root. He wore a locket around his neck. Inside, a lock of hair she had given him before she died, along with a note. "When you doubt yourself, touch this. Here is the part of me that will never leave." He never opened it in public, only on solitary nights when the silence hurt. Evelyn also changed. No one believed it at first, not even her, but she did. She began visiting homes for vulnerable women. She became an anonymous volunteer at a center for abuse victims, and most unexpectedly, she donated all her properties, shares, and accounts to the Maya Solar Foundation. She disappeared from the public eye. No one ever heard from her again. Some say she went to a convent, others that she moved to another country. The truth is that her name ceased to be synonymous with power and became a silent shadow that no longer sought to control anything. Marcus, for his part, sank. He lost everything: fortune, reputation, allies. He tried to publish a memoir to clear his name, but no one bought it. He faded into oblivion, as men who built empires only on lies do. Elijah once saw him at a city cafe alone, disheveled, with a lost look. He didn't approach. He didn't say anything. He just thought of what Savannah had written in that last letter. "We are no longer enemies. We are nothing." A year after her death, the Foundation organized a special ceremony in her name. People came from different places. Women who had read her book, who had escaped violent homes, who had been rescued from trafficking, who had healed in silence thanks to her story. They spoke out loud, without shame, without fear. At the end of the event, a woman took the microphone and said, "I was invisible until I read her story. Savannah didn't die. She woke up in me and in many others." Elijah closed his eyes and smiled. As he left, Lena took his hand. "Do you think she sees us from up there?" "I have no doubt. She is in you, in me, in all of us. I dream about her sometimes. What does she say?" "To keep writing, that words heal too." And Lena wrote a lot.